We are absolutely delighted to have with us today Erich Bremer, who is from the New Jersey Department of Agriculture. He has been the organic certifier for the department. We have Dave Chapman, who is a farmer in Vermont, and he has started the Real Organic Project, which you will find out more about. And we have Sam Malriat from the Rodale Institute that was really did the seminal work on regenerative and they started the regenerative organic certification add-on label. So NOFA New Jersey has been very concerned about labels, just because when we got started in 1985, there was so much confusion in the marketplace. Everything was called organic, natural, sustainable, and none of it had any meaning. There was no legal standard or legal definition for any of these words. So around 1989, NOFA New Jersey started our own certification program. And we then, when the federal program got started, we adopted their standards and became an accredited certifier with the department. When we did that, we sent over all of our files as well as our administrator, who was Erich Bremer, to the department. And we did this knowing that there would still maintain tremendous integrity in the organic label because Erich was going to be the certifier. And indeed, he has done that over the years, and we are incredibly grateful to Erich for all that he has done at the New Jersey Department of Agriculture. So with that, Erich, why don't you tell us about the organic label? And I know you have a little presentation about that.
I sure will, and thank you for that, Stephanie. So what I've prepared is a short PowerPoint presentation that's going to briefly explain the USDA organic program and how we can assist. So if there's any farmers out there right now who are considering organic certification, use us as a resource because I miss talking shop with my organic farmers. So I'm going to go ahead and play this presentation, but I will be here. If you have any questions as it's moving along, please jot them down, and I would love to answer any questions that you might have. So let's see if we can get this going here. All right, am I up? Because now I can't see you guys.
Well, we can see you, but we don't have your presentation on the screen.
Okay, I must be missing the screen. Oh, here it is. I'm sorry. Oh. Okay, share.
There you go. Great.
All right, is that coming up?
Yes, thank you.
Beautiful.
Erich, is there audio with this?
There is. Are you not hearing the audio?
Yeah, we don't hear
Yeah, we're not hearing it. I'm sorry.
Oh, no.
Well, why don't you just talk it through?
I can do that. Okay. Let me turn off. Go back. See, the problem is I don't have the notes in front of me, Stephanie. So yeah, let me just wing it then. Unless I can see some way. I don't see any audio feature options. Okay, so I'm
How
just
about-
going to wing this and do it verbally then. And you don't get to hear all the cool music in the background.
Eric, if you
So
want, you can go up into the zoom.us menu at the top. If you see that,
I'm looking for it.
the top of your desktop, typically where there would be file and edit and whatnot.
No.
Eric, you've gone mute now.
Oh dear.
Okay, I'm unmuted.
Okay,
Maybe it is just better to
just
have you
chat.
live. Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah, let me just go ahead and do it live. So let me go back to the PowerPoint. All right, so we're all on the first slide right now.
Yes.
All right. So in the brief history, and now I can't see any of it. In the 1980s, consumer groups basically, and the farmers who were doing organic farming at that time, they called for this government regulation, and they needed to. For what it says, consistent standards and reciprocity. What was good on the East Coast wasn't good enough for the folks on the West Coast. What was good on the West Coast wasn't good enough for the East Coast. So got the government involved and said, hey, we really need a consistent organic standard. So the Organic Foods Production Act was attached onto the 1990 Farm Bill, and it required the USDA to go ahead and establish those rules, which they did. It took them a while to write, but in 97, they came out with the first proposed rule. And the problem with that is when it came out and folks saw it, it generated over 250,000 negative comments. So that's a problem. So they went ahead and they went back and rewrote it with guidance from the NOSB and lots of folks who showed up at those meetings and gave testimony. And finally, on December 21st, 2000, they came out with the final rule, which is officially titled 7 CFR Part 205 National Organic Program Final Rule. So what did that mean for New Jersey? That meant that now in New Jersey, once that rule was passed, all crops and products labeled as organic had to meet those organic standards from the USDA if you were going to represent them as organic. Now, there was something in there that said operations generating over $5,000 in annual sales must be certified by an accredited certification agency. So, as Stephanie had mentioned, NOFA New Jersey had their own standards at that point, and they had been certifying to their own standards. And I thought the first certification was in 91, but it sounds like it might have happened as early as 89 or 90. So NOFA had been certifying to their own standards for many, many years, but now we were going to start certifying to the national standards. And we did. We were in the first round of accredited agents, and in 2002, we're the first agent to actually complete certification on an organic farm here in New Jersey. Then in 2007, the certification program moved from NOFA New Jersey into the New Jersey Department of Agriculture. And there were lots of good reasons for that to happen. Unfortunately, in May of 2022, so last year, we had to reluctantly surrender our accreditation. And so we are no longer a certifying agent. So that makes me a bit sad. It makes a lot of our farmers very sad, who I was working with. However, all is not lost because there are 17 other accredited certification agents who are working here in New Jersey. So there's plenty of opportunity to still get certified here in New Jersey. And those 17 agents, they run the gamut from small nonprofit certifiers up to the largest for-profit certifiers. So as far as certification resources here in New Jersey, there's a lot. We have an organic hotline that I monitor. So if anybody's got questions about the certification process or the requirements, they can call that line and get me on the phone. So what can we help you do as an organic farmer or somebody who wants to become an organic farmer? Well, we can surely help you navigate the regulatory requirements. That's sort of my specialty. Can help you identify an accredited certification agent that's going to be a good fit for your farm. We can help you prepare your organic system plan, and we can help guide you towards resources and programs that are going to be beneficial to you as an organic farmer. Also want to mention that as far as costs go, the USDA has an organic certification cost share program. You know, it takes a year to get your money back, but eventually you will get your money back. And so certified operations can receive up to 50% of their certification costs for the year, not to exceed $500 per certification scope. And a certification scope means certified for crops, livestock, wild crops, or handling. And believe it or not, some farms are certified in all of those scopes. And the last resource I wanted to mention is ATTRA. ATTRA stands for Applied Technology Transfer for Rural Areas. Nobody uses that anymore. They just say ATTRA and use the acronym. So why am I mentioning ATTRA here? Because ATTRA is an excellent resource for how-to information, for that technical information of, hey, I want to do organic tomatoes. What's the best thing I can do in terms of fertilization, pest control, getting prepared for this? Well, go to ATTRA. They have some really good documents. They've got webinars. They have videos, a lot of really good information, which is available through their website. And it's very simple, attra.ncat.org. So that's a great resource for folks to know coming right out of the gate. And the last slide I have was just a slide to say thank you. I wanted to thank NOFA New Jersey for hosting this event. Wanted to thank all of you guys who came on to watch this event, and thank you for your interest in organic agriculture. And so that is my introduction into the world of USDA. How do I stop sharing now?
Yeah. Devin, can you help Eric stop sharing the screen?
Yeah, Eric, go back into your Zoom. It's okay, I'll share mine. All right. So who do we have next, Stephanie?
Great. Well, thank you so much for that overview, Eric. It was very helpful. Now, Dave Chapman is going to tell us why he felt that the organic label was not enough because it no longer was real organic. So Dave, you're up.
Thank you, Stephanie. I just want to say a call out to Eric. In the work that I've done, I've come to know a lot of the certifiers, and the New Jersey Department of Agriculture under Eric was one of the most respected in the country for me. So before I knew Eric, I knew of his work. So, okay, I started farming a long time ago. And in 1985, I was one of the founders of Vermont Organic Farmers, which was the first time that NOFA Vermont started their own certification group. And group of farmers started it. I can't remember, maybe 15 of us, something like that. And it's now, whatever, 800 or something. So it's grown a bit since then. And I was actually opposed to the USDA getting involved and having a federal law. And I think I was wrong about that. I think it was a good idea, and I see the world of hurt that Regenerative is getting into without any federal standards. There's simply no way to define it. It's whatever anyone says. So I appreciate that we don't have so much of the Wild West in organic. Nonetheless, things have been going wrong with the USDA program, and I didn't realized that for a long time because they weren't going wrong in Vermont. Things were great here. And the organic certification program, which was administered by Vermont organic farmers, was had complete integrity and transparency. It was everything that we would hope from such a program. And it was around 2013, 14 that I first detected some serious problems. And I was not in any way involved with national policy. I didn't follow any of that. I didn't even go to meetings. I just farmed and raised my kids and lived the life of a happy, crazy farmer. And somewhere in there, I grow tomatoes in a greenhouse. That's my primary crop. And I noticed that tomatoes were showing up in the market that were in fact hydroponic, that were being certified as organic. And I thought, how can this be? We fixed this. The little bit of policy work I did was back in 2010. I wrote letters to the National Organic Standards Board saying, please don't allow hydroponics to be certified as organic. And the National Organic Standards Board agreed with that and voted overwhelmingly to banish the concept of hydroponics from organic certification. And what I discovered was that, in fact, that had not been acted on, and they were certifying hydroponic as organic. We didn't know what to do. We were just a couple farmers up in Vermont, and we started a petition. We started 2 petitions, and one was for farmers, and we got 500 farmers in the US to sign it, and one was for eaters, and we got 1,000 eaters to sign it. And we sent that to the National Organic Program, and they actually had some concern because we had people like Michael Pollan and Dan Barber signing those petitions, and these were prominent names in our culture. And so they were talking with us about it. And we went through some years of discussion and actually rallies protesting this. And in that process, I got an education because I started going to these national meetings, and I discovered that the problem was bigger than just hydroponics, and that organic had a really big problem with the certification of confined livestock, particularly dairy cattle, and even worse, chickens, poultry. And these seem so completely opposed to what we all believed organic was and what the rest of the world believes organic is. And we pushed it and we pushed it, and we were really trying for reform. And in 2017, there was a big meeting down in Jacksonville, Florida, and we lost the vote at that meeting. And this was the same organization, the National Organic Standards Board. But in 7 years, things had changed dramatically from what they were. It wasn't the same people, but what that group, and that group was entirely 100% selected by Secretary of Agriculture Tom Vilsack. And what that group voted was they would not vote against hydroponics. They didn't actually vote to support it, but they would not vote to condemn it. And that was a huge turning point. And people were crying, and people were calling us from around the country. And we had a rally at that meeting, and 60 farmers from around the country came to Jacksonville, Florida, to protest this. And they were very eloquent. 59 of them testified. Elliot Coleman refused to testify because he refused to acknowledge the right of the USDA to define organic. And I supported Elliot on that. So we left that meeting, and we knew that we had lost a lot. And I came back to Vermont, and we got together a group of farmers. A bunch of people went from Vermont. So we got 30 farmers at the NOFA headquarters a few weeks later. And we said, what are we going to do? And it was just a very impromptu gathering. We just called around and said, what are we going to do? So we got together, and there was total consensus that we were not going to accept it, and that we were going to create our own label that represented organic, that represented real organic. And the group was divided about whether it should be a standalone label or an add-on. And actually, the majority wanted a standalone. They wanted to break completely free from the USDA and create their own organic label. And as time went on, we decided to make it an add-on for lots of strategic reasons that we can talk about if people are interested. But that was the birth of the Real Organic Project. So it was 100% farmer-led, and it still is. And we created a certification program to help identify people who met our very simple standards, which are basically, genuinely building your farm plan on building the fertility of the soil, and absolutely prohibiting hydroponics, absolutely prohibiting the confinement of livestock in a CAFO-like situation. Another radical thing that we did, and this will be a little bit different from our friends at ROC, is that we went for whole farm certification. So you can't have a field of broccoli over here that's organic and a field of broccoli next to it that's conventional. And you can't even have one with 5 fields in between. If it's your farm, then it's got to be, the whole farm's got to go organic. We have certain exceptions that we allow, but it's different from the federal standard. And I'm sure people are going to be curious about how we're different from ROC, and we're not very different. When ROC started, they were no-till for their gold and silver levels, and we were not. We did not believe that that was correct. And we think no-till is great if you can do it organically, but we don't think that tillage is necessarily bad at all, and it's often done very well. So that was an initial difference, but I think ROC has pretty much moved to join us in adding their standards. We have the same animal welfare standards, essentially. They'll allow split farm, we don't. They have stronger worker welfare standards than we have, so that's a difference between us. So it was a radical thing to name it the Real Organic Project. And at first, it created quite a stir amongst even our friends, because there was still this attempt to be quiet and to work things out, and a fear of dividing organic in the public eye and saying that organic is fighting. And this strategy had really led to our defeat. It had just not worked. It was, as Erich was talking about earlier, the big tent strategy. Let's build a big tent. Let's bring in everybody. Let's bring in the corporations, and hopefully everything will get better. And in fact, what happened is that we had invited Godzilla to dinner, and Godzilla ate what Godzilla wanted to eat and didn't have good table manners. So I think that the code of silence really worked out pretty badly for organic. We simply kept losing more and more and more. And we felt that it was time to stop being silent about it and to stand up and say, this is what we believe organic is. It's also what the rest of the world believes organic is. We didn't invent it. The opposite is true. The USDA invented their version, and it was quite a departure from the traditional version. It's even a departure from the law. The Organic Food Production Act, which I did not support, but it's a pretty good law. I mean, it's an amazingly good law. So I think that the problem isn't with the law, the problem is with the enforcement. And I think if the law was actually enforced as it was intended when it was written, I think there would not be a need for a Real Organic Project or a regenerative organic certification. I think that we could all go home and go back to farming and have a potluck and have a good time. And I'm afraid that actually, we can't do that. We can, but if we do, things are just going to get worse. and something that many people have spent their whole lives working on for good reason is going to just be eroded and go away. So I want to say one other thing. Real Organic is not primarily about building a brand. We are not primarily targeted at businesses and other brands. We are trying to build a movement or re-engage, reinvigorate a movement that we were all part of. And I think that movement is still there and still alive. But I think that there's a funny thing that happens when the USDA came in. And, we all used to go to meetings every year, and we'd have this long meeting, and we'd bring a pot, we'd bring lunch, and we'd argue all day about the standards. And then we'd vote on them, and that was it. We do it once a year, and we always got to see each other. All the farmers came. It wasn't like 5% came. Everybody came. And they had this long thing, and we knew each other, and we kind of renewed our relationships. And when the USDA came in and took over, it's just what happened. All of a sudden, it didn't matter what we thought. The rules were being set by somebody else, and somebody quite remote, somebody that we couldn't even talk to. And it was okay. We were all getting busy trying to make a living farming. And so we didn't mind not going to another meeting, but we lost something precious. The light went out of our eyes just a little bit. And certainly as a movement, we lost something. And for a movement to exist, we have to be together. Stephanie might have said, I started the Real Organic Project. I didn't, right? It was started by a group. I was one of that group. And it's still run by a group. We now certify 1,050 farms across the country. So this is a movement, and there's frankly no economic benefit for being certified with us. Campbell's Soup isn't going to buy your tomatoes if you're certified with the Real Organic Project and give you a better price. It's just, that's not the deal. And I hope that we will get to the place where there is an economic reward, but that's not the purpose of this. The purpose of this is to keep Real Organic alive, and that will only happen as a movement of people who are actually involved and committed and connected to each other. And that is what we're trying to do. I am a farmer too, and the only way ultimately this works is if we can make a living. So we've got to find a way to connect to eaters, and we have to have people who eat need to be part of the movement. It can't just be a farmer movement, because then it will fail. The tractorcade was beautiful, and they drove 1,000 tractors into the mall in Washington, D.C., and it made all the news, and nothing changed because they never got the eaters. So this has got to be a movement of people who eat, people who buy, customers and farmers, and then we can change things. And I think we are changing things. So I see that my 15 minutes just ran out. So I will be quiet and turn it over.
Well, thank you so much, Dave. That was really informative. We're going to move on now to the regenerative organic certification that Sam is going to speak to us about. At this moment, there's a lot of greenwashing going on with the word regenerative, because all of a sudden there is legislation that puts a tremendous amount of money into, quote, smart agriculture and regenerative agriculture. So everybody wants to hop on board. So Sam, tell us how we can keep it organic.
Sure. Thanks, Stephanie. And thanks to NOFA New Jersey for having us here. Just have to start by saying I have such an enormous amount of respect for Dave, what you're doing, and Eric, what you've done in New Jersey. I think probably the biggest compliment I can pay is that one of our consultants has a farm that is actually Real Organic Project certified. So we agree on I would say pretty much everything here at this discussion. There's just like was mentioned, these are add-on certifications. So what we're saying here is that the USDA organic label, for all the work that that has been put into it over time, there's some things missing, and there are some things being done the wrong way. And we recognize that as an institute that has been focused on organic cropping systems and research and education for over 75 years. So I'll start at the beginning. My name's Sam. I'm the director of the Organic Consulting Program at Rodale Institute. And Rodale Institute, for those of you that aren't aware, is a 501c3 nonprofit. And we're based in Kutztown, Pennsylvania, which is about, say, like an hour and 20 minutes northwest of Philadelphia. And we've been there for a really long time, focused on exactly what I mentioned: research and education in organic cropping systems. One of our largest experiments and longest running experiments that kind of put us on the map is called our Farming Systems Trial. And that's a 40-year study comparing organic and conventional grain cropping systems in the United States. So it's basically comparing the status quo of conventional production with different organic practices. So there are two: there's a manure-based and a legume-based system. Around 2008, those separated into both tillage and no-till replicates. So we've got this replicated, 72 times across the whole farm, and now we have 40 years worth of data to reflect on, to say a lot, really, which is that organic production results in yields that are very similar to conventional yields. That is always a misunderstanding about organic production. It uses less energy, makes farmers more profitable. And there are a whole lot of reasons that we believe in organic agriculture, and we continue to research. So that's the Rodale Institute. And as far as the consulting service goes, that's a fairly new endeavor for the Institute. We've always had people come to Rodale and say, I'm interested in transitioning to organic production. I don't know how to do it. We never really had an outreach arm. So about 4 years ago, we received some funding from the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture to start a consulting service, which would offer free consulting to farmers, to conventional farmers that wanted to transition to certified organic production. So we started that just in Pennsylvania. We gained some traction, and now today, about 4 years later, we have 13 consultants across the country that are engaged in this work, helping conventional farmers that are interested in soil health and organic management transition their operations, or at least a portion of their operations, to USDA organic. So that's kind of the work I'm engaged in at the moment. And then I should say, so I guess taking us back to the certification discussion, I think we all agree that there are some failings with the USDA certification that have been outlined here. Some of the most egregious of which deal with animal welfare, deal with the protection and use of natural resources, which is in the standard, but as Dave said, it doesn't really tend to get enforced the way it should. I have to say, one of the things that I really appreciate about Real Organic Project is that it's free to farmers. This is something that should be available to everyone. And sometimes certification fees and things can be a barrier at the USDA level for farmers to enter. So we all recognize that there are some issues. So this was probably 4 or 5 years ago. A group of stakeholders came together, including Rodale Institute. So this is not our certification. Regenerative Organic is not Rodale Institute certification. It's administered by what's called the Regenerative Organic Alliance. We just helped create some of the standards. So this group of stakeholders were basically nonprofits, farms, and companies coming together to say, yeah, we agree organic really isn't doing enough. And the word regenerative is getting tossed around a lot, and people seem to be taking from that word something that is greater than organic. And that's not really the tack we want them to take. We need consumers to start connecting regenerative with the word organic, because we believe organic is regenerative. So that was kind of the synthesis of the certification, was these stakeholders coming to the table, some of the others of which are Patagonia, Dr. Bronner's, Rodale Institute at the table as well with the ROA, to try and say, what can we do to take all of this interest in regenerative and take it back to organic, but at the same time, build on some of the failings that the USDA organic label, really is not taking into account, have taken a really long time to change. Because some of, it can take 10, 20 years to change a single line within the NOP regulations. So it came together and created what was called the Regenerative Organic Certification, sometimes called ROC, sometimes just Regenerative Organic, but it's never just regenerative. It's not just a regenerative certification. It is innately tied to the word organic. To obtain the Regenerative Organic Certification, having the USDA organic certification is a prerequisite. So you need to be USDA organic certified in order to get the RO certification. So that was kind of the genesis of the idea. And the standard itself is built on 3 pillars. And the first pillar is soil health, second is animal welfare, and the third is social fairness. And I can share my screen very briefly here and just sort of show you what that means. These 3 pillars here and the bullets underneath them kind of show what this standard is built on. That means that, and what I mean by built on is that the framework, what the auditors that go to the farm and decide whether or not a farm can be certified regenerative organic do, is they look for each of these things: that a farm is building soil organic matter, using cover crops, that animals are able to have access to shelter, freedom from hunger, fear, and distress. And then, kind of a really important part of this that no certifications in the organic world have addressed up until now, at least to my knowledge, outside of, fair trade, is social fairness. And that is that people are getting paid properly. They're getting paid a living wage, that they have the ability to do capacity building, freedom of association, no forced labor, and they can form democratic organizations. So these are the pillars upon which this certification is built. Some of the other, to make this even more confusing, some of the things that can fulfill each of those pillars are existing certifications that are out there. So for example, if you wanted to fulfill the animal welfare pillar of the regenerative organic certification, you could obtain a Global Animal Partnership Step 4 certification, and that would fulfill that column for you. So it's kind of like, you can look at it like an Eagle Scout badge. If you can, get some of these other merit badges, it will contribute to your regenerative organic certification and your fulfillment of the standards in each one of those pillars. What I really appreciate about this standard is it does have a set of regulations that you can read. You can decide for yourself whether or not this is something that's important to you. You can see all of the practices within. I mean, this is for better or worse, this is a 50-page standard. So you can read it in each one of these things and see sort of that this kind of lines up with your perception of what is regenerative. Some of the basics here are, this does not allow CAFOs. There are no concentrated animal feeding operations can be certified regenerative organic. There are also quite a bit. One that I really appreciate is some of these, a lot of physical modifications in terms of animal welfare are prohibited in regenerative organic under the animal welfare pillar. So there's quite a bit here for people to explore. It's on their website. And so what's nice about this is just that it's all here to outline. When you look at other regenerative standards that might be out there that are maybe a little bit more conventional or not connected to organic, sometimes the standard is very short, or you can't read it, or it's not there. So I think I'll probably close by saying, if a farmer is interested in applying for something like this, and look, to be practical and to be realistic, this is not for everyone. It's set up to be attainable by everyone, but at the current place, we try to meet farmers where they are, and a lot of times they have a lot of work to put in just to improve their own organic operation. To get to something like this takes a lot of work and a lot of additional labor sometimes and equipment. So that's something that we're very aware of, and we try to tell people ahead of time. But farmers apply for this very much in the same way as organic certification. You would fill out a regenerative organic system plan, submit it to the ROA. You get an audit from a certifying body. It's very similar process there. One thing I'll say, just kind of to close, is that we all know that the term regenerative is getting used quite a bit. And what really upsets me about it, and especially our consulting team, is that regenerative seems to be getting used and gaining a lot of popularity in the conventional farming world as being synonymous with no-till agriculture. And the type of no-till agriculture, to be honest with you, that really heavily relies on chemical use and does not improve soil health. I agree with Dave completely. Tillage, you can till and have healthy soil. And in fact, there are studies that are showing that some soils that are tilled, depending on what their composition is and what the organic matter additions are healthier than those that have been no-tilled for a long time under heavy chemical and synthetic fertilizer use. So that alarms us, because if that is gaining popularity in the conventional farming world, what that really is kind of a Trojan horse for the status quo. And we don't like that. So what I will say is nice about this standard is that companies have come to us and they say, hey, we have our own regenerative standard, and we would love for Rodale to help us meet that standard. Take a look at it. Let us know what you think. And our answer is no, that we're not going to help you meet your own regenerative standards. So you can greenwash, so you can tell consumers that your product is regenerative, when really we believe it has to be organic first. And what that has done is caused a lot of companies to leave the table, go back to their directors of sustainability and their group and say, okay, you know what? We'll try your standard. We'll try regenerative organic certification. And we'll start by working with your team to get some of our growers certified organic, and we'll go from there. That's a really good thing, because it kind of shuts that conversation down right away. They come to us and they say, we want to do our own thing. And that rejection has caused, I would say at this point, at least 10 companies that we've worked with to say, okay, we'll try it your way. And I think that's a really good thing. It does prevent greenwashing in a way. And I know there's a lot more to this discussion. I know there are a lot of issues just with certification itself, but I hope that we can find a way to have all of these things coexist for a little while as we try to push broader change. Because a lot of progressive movements in agriculture like this, it's upsetting when we tear each other down over nuance. We need to stick together and point out the things that are actually big issues that we cannot tolerate. Hydroponics being one of them, the use of the term regenerative to maintain something that already exists. So that's a little bit about the standard and how it works, and I'll stop there.
Great. Well, thank you, Sam. Perhaps you could tell us, is there a fee for your ROC label? We know that the farmer has to pay a fee first to get his organic certification. So then is there an additional fee for the ROC? And about how many farms in the United States do you have certified at this time?
Yeah, and I just to be clear, we don't certify them. We have nothing to do with the certification, and it's not our label. So it's just really important because people do come to us with that intention. But there is a fee. It's similar in structure to the organic USDA organic certification fee. It is a bit more expensive, and it depends on the scope of your operation. And I'm sorry, what was the second part of your question?
How many farms do you
How
have?
many farms? Yeah, they are publishing a map on the Regenerative Organic Alliance's website that has all of the farms, but I think they're in the hundreds right now. I think maybe 300 or 400. Don't quote me on that, but it's hard to tell at the moment because certifying bodies now have the ability to certify farms as regenerative organic, and they have a lot of that information internally.
I see. And does the ROA send out an inspector to the farm?
So the ROA created the framework, and they have administered that to they can accredit certifying bodies. The certifying bodies are the ones that are sending out the auditors. Yes. So very similar process.
Right. Right. So at this point, I would like to open up the discussion to questions from our audience, and Devin is going to be moderating that part of the program.
Thank you, Stephanie. I've got so many questions, so little time. First, thank you all for joining us and presenting. I'll start with, this is aimed at Dave, but it's really for everybody here. My first NOFA interaction was actually your presentation at an annual meeting, I think maybe 2018. And it really evoked an emotional response out of me. I remember just getting all fired up about, you know, the co-opting of the NOP and the USDA label, or that's how I interpret it. So my question is, in the big bucket that is food and ag, right now, this being relatively young movement, and I'm glad that you view it as a movement, and with it not, correct me if I'm wrong, there's not a quick and clear market advantage to getting these certifications because maybe the public consumer base doesn't yet have the awareness or familiarity with it. And I'm making assumptions here. So assuming that it's purely elective and the farmer chooses to do so, is it mostly based on emotion and joining that movement and wanting to send the message that we believe that these principles for organic certification should be more stringent? And I guess maybe a two-parter. Have you noticed any market benefits to folks who do get either the ROC certification or the ROP certification? Sorry, that was a big one.
Okay. Okay. So let me take a try. Is there a reason? Sorry, say that first one again.
So the first one is, you know, the farmers are, it's elective. No one's forcing them to get certified.
Yeah.
You know, what are the main reasons that farmers are? Is it to join the movement, or do they see a marketing advantage? You know.
Yeah. Okay, good. So I would, just kind of look back to where organic began in this country. And there was a generation before me. And, Walnut Grove was down in Pennsylvania, I think.
Walnut Acres.
Walnut Acres, excuse me, was one of the very, very first. But then the 60s hit and things, exploded. And I kind of came out of that world. And when I went to Vermont, organic was starting to sprout like seedlings, was coming up all over. And it really was not economic. There was no market. So it wasn't like, oh, I see a chance to take advantage of this market. There was no market. We became organic all because we believed in it. And then we created a market out of that belief. And I don't mean that, some individuals are heroic. There was a movement going on. It was a time of tremendous change in our culture. Eventually, it got to where it was so successful that people were becoming organic just for the money because it was good. And I embrace that, you know, but I certainly hope that when they come in the door, they suddenly realize that this is right. You know, if somebody was you know, an organic farmer and you look in their refrigerator and nothing in it is organic, I say we got a problem, right? So I think that this idea of green capitalism, which we can say, good, I hope that works. But the idea that it's greed is going to set us free, I don't think so. So I think that we've almost come to shun idealism, or, you know, people working for the common good as being, you know, some strange idea or something that elitists do, or I don't know what. But I think it's where I came from. It's what we were doing. Of the 1,050 farms who are certified with us, very few are doing it for a market advantage, because frankly, there ain't one, right? However, that doesn't mean that there isn't some economic strategy or wisdom there, which is that I believe that the reason that chemical no-till, being called regenerative, is exploding as a cultural force is partly because organic has become degraded. And I think that, as Michael Pollan said, they're going to kill the golden goose, right? It has become a place where people can come and make a living, but if eaters, consumers don't trust it, then it's not going to work. And it's not going to go away. No matter how bad organic gets, it's going to continue because there is no other viable alternative to conventional agriculture. And people, you know, the biggest vendor of organic food in America is Walmart. And people go to Walmart, they still want to find an alternative to stuff that's been raised chemically. And that's wonderful. That's wonderful. You know, that's victory. That's a step towards victory. We need to celebrate that. But I think that if we look at this strategically and we say, you know, for organic to work as a market force, we need to protect it. And that was the only job that the USDA was assigned, to protect the integrity and the transparency of the organic seal. That was it. They were never tasked with promoting organic, and they made very clear that they wouldn't. They said, we're just here to be the umpire. Fine, we welcome a fair umpire. So I think that Real Organic and Rock are both trying to say, let's have fair umpires. If we do that, people will come, because what we're offering is actually what they want when they go and buy organic. They do not want, I've always said, if we had a video screen at the milk counter, you know, at the milk display, and you had Aurora milk, and you had a video of where that milk comes from in a CAFO, a large CAFO in Colorado, and then you had a video of Butterworks and where that milk comes from, a beautiful hill farm in Vermont, everything done exactly as you would dream an organic farm would be. I think everybody's going to go and buy the Butterworks, and they're going to pay a premium gladly. And the problem isn't what people want and what they're willing to spend their money on. It's what they're being convinced of. And they're being misled, because most of the majority of the milk, I would say at this point, is coming from someplace like Aurora, not someplace like Butterworks. And yet people keep going to buy organic, hoping to get Butterworks.
I'd like to throw some 2 cents in on a part of your question, Devin, because I believe as you were talking, you said, you know, do we need a new standard? And we sort of talked briefly about this before the meeting started. You know, sure, I'm miffed at the NOP that right now I don't think they're being a wise, fair umpire. However, you know, having been someone who has studied these organic regulations, and I'm talking about the final rule that came out in 2000. You know, when that first came out, I remember sitting down first with my director at the time, who was Karen Anderson, and then with the certification committee, and we poured through this stuff and we looked at it, and we were gleefully pleased that they did such a tremendous job getting everything in there that they managed to get in there. And so, it all comes down to who's reading this document and how are they interpreting it? Because it seems more than clear to me that in order to certify something like a container growing system, in order to certify something like an organic CAFO, in order to certify hydroponic, you have to look away from some of these sections and some of these requirements in the organic regulations. If you were truly following all of these regulations, those things could not exist in organic. So the rules are there, the regulations are there, but it's the way that they're being interpreted and enforced, and I think that some of the certifiers in our country need to share in some of the angst and the anger about all of this, because they're really the ones who stepped forward and said, hey, no, you know what? What's wrong with organic hydroponic as long as they're using approved materials? And from NOFA, day one, I was taught, Emily Brown Rosen, Karen Anderson, and every other fantastic person that they had with NOFA, organic is not input substitution. It is not. And if you look at these standards, the way they were written in 2000, it's clear. So I'll stop harshing on the current system, but I really truly believe if all of these regulations were enforced properly, we wouldn't be having this conversation tonight. And one of the regrets that I have is that we can't hold up organic certification at this crucial moment and say, this is regenerative. You want to think about regenerative? Well, here's organic. It's all about regenerative. And now we've lost the ability to say that, unless I'm organic and I'm real organic certified, and I'm organic and I'm ROC certified. Sure, that's regenerative agriculture.
Thank you, Eric. That was great. Sam, you showed us a lot of different labels on one of your slides. Am I correct in believing that the ROP and the ROC are the only ones that are add-ons to the organic label, that the others are independent labels by themselves, like humane and
Yeah, those are administered by other. Yeah. Although to my knowledge, I think, Dave, that's true, that those are the only two. Is there another one?
Well, one of the labels that was shown was Naturland, and that's an add-on label in Europe, exactly the same. They are an add-on to down there. It says fair. That's the Naturland label.
Okay.
And the one to the left, the green guy. And the one at the top also for the top one to the right of Demeter is Naturland fair.
Yeah.
And I believe that you guys also accept Naturland for animal welfare too. So they're a big international add-on. They've got 140,000 farms that they certify. And we are actually doing a joint venture with them, which is why I know about them. And, they're just very respected in Europe. And they approached us wanting to work together. They wanted a partner in the US so they can bring in organic coffee and chocolate. And, we're going to work together on processors. So that's the only one I saw. I think the rest, I think the others are truly standalone.
Yeah.
Like certified humane, right? They could be not qualify for organic, but it could be humane.
Right. And you would still, to be clear, you would still have an audit for the animal welfare pillar, even if you had a certified humane label, but certified, that label would fulfill a certain number of the requirements within the framework. If you happen to have that, as if, for example, you were certified organic and you had a certified humane label, they wouldn't need to check some of the things that they know certified humane is already looking for. So And I have nothing to add to the previous question. I think that was perfect.
We have with us Al Johnson, who is an inspector, certification inspector. I was wondering, Al, if you wanted to add any words of wisdom before we close.
Well, maybe it's more of a question. I see some of those, particularly animal welfare labels that you just pulled up, Sam. And I don't know that I've really heard a consistent definition of a CAFO, because some of the things that you may consider a CAFO, Dave, some of them may not. And I know there is a USDA definition of CAFO, but I think the term is thrown around a lot, really loosely. And sometimes I think there could be abuse of that on both sides of the fence.
There is a definition of CAFO, you know, and you can have an AFO as well, which is a CAFO but with fewer numbers in it. So you can have an animal feeding operation in which the animals just sit there basically, and their food is brought to them, and they don't go outside to the pasture, maybe to chew their cud, but not to eat. And a CAFO just means the concentration is high enough in that area that it reaches a threshold. I think it's 1,000 animal units or something.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this then. When the USA animal, I forget what it's called, the new animal regulations come into effect.
Yeah,
we don't know the final form yet, but will there be things that are allowed under that wouldn't be allowed under either of your programs for the animal welfare? Because generally, with organic, numbers is not an issue. It's concentration, it's outside access. So I think in some of what I'm hearing from you, Dave, is numbers may be more of a factor for you than they might be for the USDA.
Shall I go first, Sam? I'm sure you got it.
Yep.
So I am unusual, I guess, in the nonprofit world in that I do not support the OLPS. I believe it's just going to be an excuse for CAFOs to continue to function. If they close down Herbrooks because of it, I'll eat my hat and I'll take Jenny Tucker out to dinner and I'll send Tom Vilsack a love letter. But I don't think so. I think that what's going to happen is that those large producers, and it was really targeted towards poultry and some on pork, but I think they're going to put in these interesting little ramps from the second story of their chicken factory down to the gravel slab underneath. And I don't think it's going to change to be what I believe, and I think probably what you believe, the way those animals should be raised. And because of that, I can't support it. So yes, our standards are considerably stricter, and I'm sure that ROCs are too, than what the OLPS is going to allow. And I know that a lot of nonprofits, they've kind of banded together and say, no, we really support this because it's a little win. It's a little bit better. But I honestly don't think it will lead to the decertification of a single operation in America, in which case I don't see that it's better. So I think it's a mistake to support something that's going to codify something that you hate.
Sam, did you want to comment?
And I really think that's the metric by which to go. It is to say, if this is really such a change in the standard, we should see some decertification of operations that are doing the wrong thing. And it's upsetting when those rules make it to final rule and that just doesn't happen. And so, no, I completely agree with that. I think I don't know the ins and outs of the origin of livestock practice standard necessarily. I do know the ROC certification has the definition that Dave just mentioned here with 1,000 animal units being per well, anyway, I can share it, but you're welcome to. I can send a link to the framework as well. But this is utilizing the EPA's definition of the CAFO. That's the one that's
Mhm,
not allowed in this particular certification.
mhm. Well,
Yeah, and I'll throw in a couple of pennies too.
yeah,
Al, even if when OLDS gets passed, if it ever comes out and sees the light of day, yeah, I think there will be some modest improvements. However, there's still going to be requirements that are currently required, I know at least by Sam's program, and I don't know so much from the Real Organic program, but NOP is still going to allow things like trimming of beaks. You can't radically debeak, but they're still going to allow trimming of beaks. And there's still going to be other animal welfare concerns that these changes to the regulations are just not going to address, in my opinion. And yeah, I would agree that I don't see folks getting decertified under these coming changes in the regulation.
well, we are running out of time, and I want to ask if anybody has a final statement that they would like to leave us with. Sam, do you want to start?
Sure, I can be quick. I just think we've been to a lot of farms across the country and visited farmers. We visited organic farmers that need a lot of work, and maybe aren't conserving the natural resources that they have on their farms as well as they could be. We've met conventional farmers that are fantastic conservationists. The more farms we visit, the more gray our opinions sort of become. And it makes things really difficult. And I imagine that also translates to the store shelf for the consumer. But I think if we kind of use the guiding principle, which is that what we're doing on farms should line up with what consumers really in their heart believe that they're buying and what they want, which is animals that are treated well and people that are treated well and food that's grown in a healthy way in a healthy environment. We'll get somewhere. It's just if in the meantime it means that we have some certifications to help keep people in line and not take advantage of that principle, I think that's a good thing. I don't know how it's all going to shake out, but I do hope that we can keep that in mind as we plod on. So, but thanks so much.
Yeah, Dave, what would you like to add?
I'd like to add something I asked Michael Paula, and I tell this story sometimes, but it's really important. I got to interview him, and I asked him, in the 15 years since Omnivore's Dilemma came out, do you think that the food system's getting better or worse? Because frankly, I get very confused about it. And he answered it in a way that, to me, completely was correct. And he said the conversation and the awareness is getting much better, much greater, much more sophisticated. People are much more engaged with how their food is grown. And the reality of the food system is getting much worse. And, herbicide use is like historically high. And, pesticides are just getting worse and more potent. And even more importantly, the whole food system is getting more siloed. And so we're getting more monopolistic, less democratic, less diverse in every aspect of the food system, in the farming, in the distribution, in the retailing. And I think that this is a great threat to us. So I think the things we're talking about are just so serious for what world we're going to leave to our kids or our grandkids. And so I think what ROC is doing, and I think what NOFA is doing, I think what Real Organic's doing, these are important things. These aren't, something that, these fringe, strange people are doing as a cult. This is actually about how we're going to live in the world for everybody. So I just want to encourage everyone to hang in there and, keep coming together and talking and linking arms, because this is not going to be easy. We are up against the biggest corporations in the world, and they're used to running it. So it's going to be a very steep hill.
Thank you. Eric, what can you?
Before I make a statement, a quick question for Dave. Dave, I looked, I think it was like 2 weeks ago, and we had, I think it was 5 farms in New Jersey that are real organic certified. Do you have an update on that number, or do you know? And
I can tell you in a minute if I just go check, but yeah, go ahead.
no, and I definitely want to steer more of our organic growers here in New Jersey to both of your projects. They need to know about this, and they need to know that that it's an option for them. And so, my closing statement, I'd like to say this, and not to be the doom and gloom guy, but Dave is right. I mean, we're in the middle of a crisis that nobody's talking about. Even the USDA concedes that right now we're losing topsoil in this country at twice the rate that would be sustainable. So that's frightening, and if we keep it up, there we're going to hit a point where we can't produce because we won't have any soil left. And so these efforts for organic, these efforts for regenerative, you know, they're crucial and they're critical. And I hope people start to reawaken. I hope we see more passion, like the passion that I first saw when I went to my first listening session for the National Organic Program when they came out to Rutgers campus, and I was still a student at Rutgers and was able to make comment at that. But back then, people were so engaged and so passionate. And I just hope that we get back to that place of engagement and passion and retake this movement, because it's not just something for feeling good. I would like us to be able to feed our grandchildren into the future.
Thank you. Well, very interesting and uplifting conversation. I want to thank our panelists so much, and also thank Devin and NOFA for having this program, because I think it is critical for people to understand what all of these labels are all about. Because when you go into the marketplace, there are so many labels, you really can't figure them all out. So I hope that we clarified some of that today. And thank you all for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you very much.
Good night and have a great weekend.
You-